I never thought my brother's wedding would be the day everything fell apart. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for most of my 32 years, I'd been the peacekeeper in our family, the one who smoothed things over when Dad's temper flared, or Mom retreated into cold silence. But that warm June afternoon in Portland changed everything. The ceremony at St. Andrew's Church had been beautiful. My younger brother Mark looked happier than I'd ever seen him as he watched his bride Emma walk down the aisle. The reception was being held at Riverview, an elegant venue overlooking the Willamette River. White fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and the sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. It should have been perfect. I was sitting at a table with my husband Jeff, nursing a glass of champagne and watching the guests dance. Mom had outdone herself planning everything, from the flowers to the menu. She'd always been fastidious, demanding, perfection in all things, especially when it came to appearances. Dad was at the bar, his loud laugh carrying across the room as he chatted with Emma's father. "You should eat something," Jeff said, sliding a plate of hors d'oeuvres toward me. "I'm not hungry," I replied, still watching Dad. He was on his fourth scotch, and the night was young. I could feel the familiar knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from my sister Lisa. "He's going to make a speech. Mom just told me. Can you stop him?" I looked up and saw Dad moving toward the microphone set up near the dance floor. His gait was unsteady, his face flushed. Mom was watching him with that tight smile she wore when she was furious, but refusing to show it. "Excuse me," I said to Jeff, already rising. "Sarah, don't," he warned, grabbing my wrist. "Let it play out. It's not your responsibility." But it always had been. Ever since I was 10, and I realized I could sometimes head off Dad's explosive arguments with Mom by asking him about work or sports, anything to distract him. Ever since I started sitting with Lisa when she cried after their fights, telling her everything would be okay tomorrow. Ever since Mark started calling me instead of Mom when he needed advice. I pulled away from Jeff and hurried across the room, but I was too late. Dad tapped the microphone, causing a screech of feedback that made everyone wince. "Hello, everyone." His words were slightly slurred. "I'd like to make a toast to my son and his beautiful bride." The room quieted, and I froze halfway between my table and the microphone. Maybe it would be okay. Maybe he'd keep it simple and sweet. You know, when Mark told me he was marrying Emma, I wasn't surprised. She's gorgeous, smart, comes from good stock. He winked at Emma's father, who forced an uncomfortable smile. But I did tell him, "Marriage isn't all roses, son. Just look at me and your mother." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. Mom's smile hardened. 40 years this August. 40 years of compromises. 40 years of... He paused, swirling his drink. Adjustments. I started moving again, faster now. "What I'm trying to say is," Dad continued, his voice getting louder, "marriage changes you, and not always for the better. Your mother and I..." "Dad," I said, reaching him at last and putting a hand on his arm. "How about we let Mark and Emma have the spotlight tonight?" He looked at me, momentarily confused, then something flashed in his eyes. Anger, or maybe hurt. "Always interrupting me, Sarah. Always thinking you know best." "I just think maybe this isn't the right time for the truth," he said loudly, turning back to the microphone. "You've always tried to hide it, haven't you? Always pretending we're the perfect family. Tell me, does Jeff know what we're really like? Does Emma?" The room had gone completely silent. Mark was staring at us, his face pale. Emma looked like she might cry. Mom had disappeared. "Dad, please," I whispered. "You're drunk. Let's go outside for some fresh air." "I'm fine right where I am," he said, jerking his arm away. The motion was so sudden that I stumbled back, bumping into a waiter carrying a tray of glasses. The crash seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. Classic Sarah, Dad laughed bitterly, always causing a scene while pretending to prevent one. That's enough, Richard. Mom's voice cut through the silence. She had reappeared at the edge of the dance floor. You're embarrassing yourself. Oh, I'm embarrassing myself. Dad's voice rose. That's rich coming from you, Elizabeth. How many times have you threatened to leave me? How many times have you packed a bag only to unpack it again because you're too afraid to be on your own? People began to whisper. I looked at Mark, silently pleading for help. But he just sat there, his arm around Emma, as if he could shield her from the implosion of our family. Lisa approached cautiously. Dad, everyone's watching, she said softly. Let them watch, he roared. Let them see what 40 years of marriage really looks like. Jeff was suddenly beside me, taking charge in a way he never had before. He pried the microphone from Dad's hand and spoke calmly into it. I think it's time for the best. Man's speech. Tom, are you ready? Emma's brother Tom jumped up, looking relieved to have something to do. Jeff guided Dad away from the microphone and toward the door, whispering something in his ear that made him stop fighting. I stood frozen, fragments of broken glass glittering at my feet, like all the illusions I'd maintained about our family. Mom approached me, her face a mask of composure. Clean that up, she hissed, gesturing at the mess. And then find your father. He can't drive home like this. Mom, Not now, Sarah. We'll talk about this later. She turned away to soothe Emma's visibly upset parents. As the best man began his speech, trying too hard to be funny and failing, I knelt down to help the waiter gather the broken glass. My hands were shaking so badly I cut myself, a thin line of red appearing on my palm. Leave it, the waiter said kindly. We'll take care of it. I nodded mutely and stood up, looking around the beautiful reception that now felt like a battlefield. Mark caught my eye from across the room, and for the first time in my life, I saw accusation there, as if I had failed him by not preventing this sooner. As if this disaster was somehow my fault. And maybe it was. Maybe all these years of peacekeeping had just delayed the inevitable. Maybe I'd actually made things worse by helping everyone. Pretend. I walked out of the reception hall into the warm summer night, blood trickling down my wrist, in search of my father, and wondering why I even bothered anymore. I found Dad sitting on a stone bench in the garden, his bow tie undone, staring at nothing. The fairy lights cast strange shadows across his face, making him look older than his 65 years. The car keys, Dad, I said, holding out my hand. The cut on my palm had stopped bleeding, but it stung in the night air. He looked up, squinting. Sarah, come sit with me. He patted the bench. When I didn't move, he sighed heavily. I'm not driving anywhere. Jeff already took my keys. I stood there, torn between anger and the lifetime habit of forgiving him. Behind me, I could hear the muffled sounds of the reception continuing. The music, the laughter, life going on despite what had just happened. You ruined Mark's wedding, I said finally. It was just a speech, he muttered, running a hand through his silver hair. Everyone was drinking. No one will remember by tomorrow. Mark will remember. Emma will remember. Her parents will remember. Dad shrugged. They'll get over it. That's when something inside me snapped. 22 years of being the family. Buffer, of smoothing things over, of making excuses for him. It all rose up like a wave and crashed down. No, they won't get over it, I said, my voice shaking. Just like I haven't gotten over you missing my college graduation because you were hungover. Or Lisa hasn't gotten over you calling her boyfriend a waste of space at Thanksgiving. Or Mark hasn't gotten over you showing up drunk to his high school championship game and picking a fight with his coach. Dad's face darkened. If this is the thanks I get for everything I've done for you kids, What have you done for us, besides teach us how to walk on eggshells and make us experts at damage control? I put a roof over your head. I paid for that fancy college degree you're so proud of. And you think that's enough? You think that makes up for the screaming matches with Mom? For the times you disappeared for days without explanation? For making us all terrified of bringing friends home because we never knew what version of you they'd meet? He stood up suddenly, swaying slightly. I don't have to listen to this. Not from my own daughter. No, you don't, I agreed, stepping back. You don't have to listen to anyone. You never have. But I don't have to keep pretending everything's okay either. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Your mother's the one you should be angry with. All these years, she's been the one threatening to leave, holding it over my head, making demands. I looked back at him. Did it ever occur to you that maybe she should have left? That maybe we'd all have been better off? The hurt that flashed across his face made me regret the words immediately, but I couldn't take them back, and maybe I didn't want to. Maybe they needed to be said. You don't mean that, he said quietly. I don't know what I mean anymore. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. I'm going back inside to help Mark and Emma salvage what's left of their wedding. I've called you an Uber. It should be here in 5 minutes. Go home, Dad. Sleep it off. I left him there in the garden and headed back toward the reception. Before I reached the doors, Jeff intercepted me. There you are, he said, relief evident in his voice. Are you okay? No, I answered honestly. I'm not. He pulled me into a hug, and for a moment I let myself lean into his strength. But only for a moment. There was still too much to do. How bad is it in there? I asked, pulling away. Your mom is telling everyone your dad wasn't feeling well. Food poisoning, apparently. I laughed bitterly. And they're buying that? Some are, others. He shrugged. The band is playing again. Dancing has resumed. Mark and Emma seem okay. Seem being the operative word. I straightened my shoulders. Let's go back in. The reception was indeed continuing, but there was an undercurrent of tension. Small clusters of guests were whispering together, falling silent as we passed. Mom was chatting with Emma's mother, her smile firmly in place, though it didn't reach her eyes. Mark and Emma were dancing, their foreheads pressed together as they whispered to each other. Lisa appeared at my side, a glass of wine in her hand. Where's Dad? Going home. I called him an Uber. She nodded. Probably for the best. Mom's in full damage control mode. What else is new? I said, more sharply than I intended. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Whoa, what happened out there with Dad? Nothing new, I sighed. Same arguments, different day. You look upset. I'm fine. She gave me a skeptical look but didn't push. That was our family's way. Don't push, don't probe too deeply, keep the peace at all costs. I grabbed a fresh glass of champagne from a passing waiter and downed half of it in one go. Jeff frowned but said nothing. He'd been telling me for years that I needed to step back from my role as family mediator, that it wasn't healthy. But he didn't understand what it was like to grow up in a house where silence could explode into shouting without warning, where tension hung in the air like smoke. The night wore on. I danced with Jeff, made small talk with relatives, helped Emma's grandmother find her shawl. I did everything expected of the sister of the groom. But something had shifted inside me. Each smile felt like a lie. Each isn't it a lovely wedding? Made me want to scream. Around midnight, as the reception was winding down, Mark caught my arm as I passed by. Can we talk? He asked, his expression serious. I nodded and we stepped outside onto the terrace. The night had cooled, and the river glittered under the moonlight. I'm so sorry about Dad, I began immediately. I should have seen it coming. I should have... Stop, Mark interrupted. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. You always do this. You always take responsibility for him. I blinked, surprised. I'm just trying to help. I know. But Sarah, it's not your job to fix everything he breaks. It never was. But no buts. Look, what happened tonight was awful. But Emma and I will be okay. We're leaving for our honeymoon tomorrow, and by the time we get back, this will just be a bad memory. Mark, he humiliated you in front of everyone. Yes, he did. And that's on him, not you. He squeezed my arm. I've been thinking a lot about our family lately, especially with starting my own. And I realized something. We're all still acting like we did when we were kids. You're still trying to protect everyone. Lisa's still trying to disappear into the background. I'm still trying to be perfect so I don't rock the boat. His words hit me like a physical blow because they were true. We were all still playing the roles we'd assigned ourselves decades ago. So what do? I asked softly. I don't know about you, but I'm breaking the cycle. Emma and I have already talked about it. Our home is going to be different. Our kids will never have to worry about which version of Dad is coming home tonight. I felt tears spring to my eyes. You'll be an amazing father, Mark. He smiled, then grew serious again. But I need you to do something for me, Sarah. Anything. Stop carrying us all. It's crushing you, and it's not helping any of us in the long run. I started to protest, but the words died in my throat. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Whatever I'd been doing all these years, the peacekeeping, the smoothing over, the pretending, it hadn't fixed anything. Our family was as broken as ever. I'll try, I promised, though I wasn't sure if I knew how to stop. Mark hugged me tightly. That's all I ask. As we walked back inside, I caught sight of Mom standing alone by the gift table, straightening already perfectly arranged presents. The familiar tightness of her shoulders told me she was still seething about Dad's behavior. For the first time, I didn't go to her. I didn't offer reassurance or help with damage control. Instead, I took Jeff's hand and asked him to take me home. On the drive back to our apartment, I leaned my head against the window and watched Portland's lights blur through my tears. Jeff reached over and took my hand, his thumb gently caressing my wedding ring. You okay? He asked softly. No, I answered truthfully. But maybe someday I will be. Create. 3 weeks after the wedding disaster, I was sitting in Dr. Barrett's office, watching dust motes float in the sunlight streaming through her window. The leather chair creaked as I shifted uncomfortably. So you've been avoiding your parents since the wedding? She asked, her voice neutral. Not avoiding exactly, I said. Just taking a step back, like Mark suggested. Dr. Barrett nodded. I'd been seeing her for about 2 months, initially for what I'd called minor anxiety issues. Jeff had gently suggested therapy after finding me awake at 3 a.m. for the 5th night in a row, compulsively checking work emails. And how does that feel? She asked. I almost laughed. That was such a therapist question. Strange, I admitted, like I'm neglecting something important. But are you neglecting something important? I thought about it. Mom had called 11 times in the past 3 weeks. I'd answered twice, keeping the conversations brief. Dad had texted once, a terse, need to talk, which I'd ignored. Lisa had reported that they were same as always, which meant they were pretending nothing had happened. It feels that way, I said finally. They're my parents. I should be there for them. Why? The question caught me off guard. Because that's what family does. Is it? Dr. Barrett leaned forward slightly. What does your family do, Sarah? Images flashed through my mind. Mom sitting stone-faced at the breakfast table while Dad slept off another bender. Lisa hiding in her room during arguments. Me making excuses for Dad to Mark's friends when he showed up late to pick us up from school, reeking of alcohol. We pretend, I said softly. We pretend everything's fine when it isn't. And who does that serve? I stared at her, unable to answer. The next day, I met Lisa for coffee at Powell's Books Cafe, our childhood sanctuary. Growing up, we'd escape to the massive bookstore whenever things got too tense at home, losing ourselves for hours among the shelves. How's the stepping back going? Lisa asked, stirring her latte. Weird, I admitted. I feel guilty all the time. Join the club. She ran a hand through her short auburn hair, so different from my blonde waves. We'd always been opposites. Me, the responsible one. Her, the rebel. Or so I'd thought. I've been seeing them for Sunday dinner, and it's exhausting. Mom acts like nothing happened, and Dad's been on his best behavior. It's like watching two people perform a play they've rehearsed for years. Have they mentioned me? Mom asks about you, says you're not answering her calls. The guilt twisted in my stomach. I just need some space. I know, Lisa said, surprising me with her understanding. Actually, I envy you a little. You're doing what I've never had the courage to do. Step away. You've stepped away plenty, I pointed out. You moved to Seattle for 3 years. Physically, yes. But emotionally? She shook her head. I've always been tangled up in their drama, even from a distance. The difference is you tried to fix it, and I just tried to run from it. I'd never thought of it that way before. I'd always seen Lisa as the strong one, the one who could detach. But maybe we were both trapped in our own ways. Have you talked to Mark? I asked, changing the subject. He and Emma are still in Thailand. From his Instagram, they seem blissfully happy. She sipped her coffee. He texted me, though. Said we need to have a family meeting when he gets back. My stomach tightened. About what? He didn't say, but I'm guessing the wedding debacle. I groaned. That sounds awful. Yep, Lisa agreed. But also maybe necessary? I don't know. Something has to change. We can't keep doing this dance forever. Her words echoed in my mind later that night as I prepared dinner. Jeff was working late, so I had the apartment to myself. The pasta sauce bubbled on the stove, filling the kitchen with the scent of tomatoes and basil. It was my grandma's recipe, one of the few positive family legacies I'd inherited. My phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at it for a long moment, my finger hovering over the decline button. Then, surprising myself, I answered. Hi, Mom. Sarah. Her voice was crisp, as always. Finally. I was beginning to think you'd changed your number. I didn't take the bait. What's up? A slight pause. Your father and I are hosting a dinner next Saturday. Family only. I need you to be there. Not, would you like to come? Or, we'd love to see you. Need. Always need with her. I'll have to check with Jeff, I said, a small act of defiance. In the past, I would have immediately agreed. It's important, Sarah. Her tone sharpened. Mark and Emma will be back. He says he has something to discuss with all of us. The family meeting, Lisa had mentioned. I'll let you know, I said, still resisting the pull to automatically accommodate her. Another pause. Longer this time. Your father asks about you. An emotional appeal, unusual for her. How is he? I asked, despite myself. Sober, for now. She sounded tired suddenly. He's trying, Sarah. The familiar mix of hope and skepticism rose in me. Dad had tried many times before. It never lasted. That's good, I said neutrally. I hope it sticks this time. Yes, well, her briskness returned. Saturday at 6. Let me know if you can make it. After we hung up, I stirred the pasta sauce mechanically, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to call and say I couldn't make it. Another part was already planning what Dish to bring, what clothes to wear, what topics to avoid. Old habits die hard. When Jeff came home, I told him about the dinner invitation. He frowned, setting down his briefcase. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" he asked. "It's only been 3 weeks since the wedding." "Mark will be there," I said. "He wants to talk to all of us." Jeff loosened his tie. "You don't have to go just because your mother demands it. It's not just that." I sat down at the kitchen table. I'm curious about what Mark has to say, and maybe I need to face them. Have it out once and for all. He raised an eyebrow. Have what out? Everything. The drinking, the fighting, the pretending. I twisted my wedding ring, a nervous habit. My therapist says I need to break the pattern. Jeff sat across from me. "And you think a family dinner is the place to do that?" "No," I admitted. "But it might be a start." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But remember what you told me the night of the wedding. You can't keep carrying them all." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. That was the hardest part of stepping back, accepting that I couldn't fix my family, that maybe they didn't want to be fixed. The rest of the week passed in a blur of work and anxiety. As a project manager for an environmental nonprofit, I was used to putting out fires, mediating conflicts, finding compromises, all skills I'd honed growing up. Sometimes I wondered if I'd chosen my career because it replicated the familiar dynamics of my childhood. On Friday night, I dreamt of the wedding again. In the dream, Dad's speech went on for hours, his voice growing louder and louder until the walls of the reception hall cracked. I tried to reach him, but my feet were stuck to the floor. I woke up gasping, my heart racing. Jeff's arm came around me in the darkness. "Same dream?" he murmured. "Yeah." I leaned into him, grateful for his steady presence. "I don't know if I can do this tomorrow." "You don't have to." "But if I don't go," I trailed off. "What? The world will end? Your family will fall apart?" His voice was gentle, not mocking. "They're adults, Sarah. They've been making their own choices for decades." I knew he was right. But letting go of responsibility for my family's happiness felt like letting go of a rope I'd been clinging to for years. Terrifying, but also potentially freeing. Saturday arrived, clear and cool. I spent the morning cleaning the apartment, a nervous habit that Jeff had learned to recognize as a sign of my anxiety. By noon, I still hadn't called Mom to confirm whether we were coming. "I should let her know," I said, staring at my phone. "So, call her," Jeff replied, not looking up from his book. "But I still don't know if I want to go." He set his book down. "Sarah, what do you want? Not what you think you should do, or what would make your mom happy, or what would keep the peace. What do you want?" I sat there, paralyzed by the simplicity and complexity of the question. What did I want? I'd spent so long prioritizing everyone else's needs that my own felt foreign, almost selfish. I began, then stopped, surprised by the answer forming in my mind. I want to go, but on my terms. I want to say what needs to be said, even if it's uncomfortable. I don't want to pretend anymore. Jeff smiled. "Then that's what we'll do." I called Mom and told her we'd be there. As I hung up, I felt something unexpected. Not dread, but a strange sense of resolution. Tomorrow would be difficult, maybe even painful, but it would be real. And after a lifetime of pretending, that felt like progress. The drive to my parents' house in Lake Oswego felt like traveling back in time. The same route I'd taken hundreds of times, past the same landmarks. The old oak tree at the corner of Boone's Ferry Road, the little bakery where Mom used to buy our birthday cakes, the park where Dad taught Mark to ride a bike before his drinking got worse. "You're gripping the steering wheel pretty hard," Jeff observed, his voice gentle. I loosened my fingers and flexed them. "Sorry, nervous habit." We can still turn around, he reminded me. I shook my head. No, I need to do this. The house looked exactly as it always had. Pristine white colonial with black shutters, meticulously maintained lawn, seasonal flowers perfectly arranged in the beds flanking the walkway. Mom's doing. She'd always been obsessed with appearances, making sure the outside looked flawless, even when everything inside was falling apart. Jeff squeezed my hand as we approached the front door. Remember, we can leave any time, he whispered. I nodded and pressed the doorbell, hearing the familiar chime echo inside. Mom answered almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the door. Sarah. Jeff. She air-kissed my cheek, her perfume enveloping me in a cloud of Chanel No. 5. Right, on time. She looked immaculate as always. Pearl earrings, cream cashmere sweater, tailored pants. No one would guess she was the same woman who once threw a vase at Dad's head during an argument over his credit card bill. Lisa's already here, she continued, leading us into the living room. And Mark and Emma arrived this morning. They're just settling in. Dad was standing by the fireplace, drink in hand. My stomach tensed until I realized it was just water. Sarah, he said, his voice oddly formal. Good to see you. I'd prepared myself for many scenarios. Him pretending nothing had happened. Him being defensive. Him being drunk again. But this cautious politeness threw me. Hi, Dad, I replied, equally stiff. Lisa was perched on the edge of the sofa. She gave me a small smile that said, Buckle up. Mark and Emma emerged from the hallway, both looking tanned from their honeymoon. Sarah. Mark hugged me tightly. Thanks for coming. Wouldn't miss it, I said, meaning it despite my anxiety. The next half hour was a masterclass in superficial conversation. Mom asked about our jobs. Dad inquired about the weather forecast. Lisa shared an anecdote about her cat. No one mentioned the wedding disaster. It was as if we were all reading from a script titled Normal Family Dinner. Only when we were seated around the dining table did the facade begin to crack. Mom had outdone herself with the meal: salmon, roasted vegetables, her famous potato gratin. But the food sat largely untouched on our plates. So, Dad said, breaking a tense silence, Mark said you wanted to talk to us about something. Mark set down his fork. Actually, yes. He looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. Emma and I have been doing a lot of thinking during our honeymoon about family and what that means to us. Mom straightened a fork that was already perfectly aligned with her plate. If this is about what happened at the wedding... It is, Mark interrupted. But not in the way you think. He took a deep breath. What happened at the wedding was awful. But it also made some things very clear to us. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Son, I've already apologized. Please, let me finish. Mark said firmly. This isn't just about your speech, Dad. It's about patterns. Patterns that have defined our family for as long as I can remember. The room went still. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, marking each second of this unprecedented moment. We all have our roles, Mark continued. Dad drinks and lashes out. Mom pretends everything's fine. Sarah tries to fix everything. Lisa disappears. And he paused. I try to be perfect so nobody focuses on me. Mom's face had gone pale. I don't think this is appropriate dinner conversation. That's the problem right there, Mark said. We never talk about the real issues. We never acknowledge the elephant in the room. And what elephant is that? Dad asked, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. Mark looked him straight in the eye. Your alcoholism, Dad, and how it's affected all of us. The word hung in the air between us. Alcoholism. We'd never called it that before, not out loud. It was always Dad had a rough day, or Dad needs to let off steam, or Dad isn't feeling well. That's ridiculous, Dad scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Lisa spoke up, surprising me. You've been drunk at every significant event in our lives. Graduations, birthdays, holidays. You missed my college graduation entirely because you were too hungover to get on the plane. And you've threatened to leave Mom at least once a year for as long as I can remember, I added, finding my voice. Mom's eyes flashed with anger. I don't see how airing all this dirty laundry helps anything. Because we're done pretending, Mark said. Emma and I are expecting a baby. The announcement landed like a bomb in the middle of the table. Under different circumstances, it would have been a moment of joy. You're pregnant? Mom asked, momentarily distracted from her anger. When? I'm 8 weeks along, Emma said, quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken since we sat down. Due in February. That's... Mom seemed to struggle for the appropriate response. Wonderful news. It is, Mark agreed. And it's also why we needed to have this conversation. Because things need to change before our child is born. Dad's face had gone red. What are you saying? That we won't be allowed to see our grandchild? I'm saying there will be boundaries, Mark replied calmly. I won't expose my child to the chaos I grew up with. I won't have them walking on eggshells, wondering which version of their grandfather they'll get that day. Mom stood up abruptly. I think I'll check on dessert. Sit down, Elizabeth, Dad said harshly. Apparently our children have staged an intervention. It's not an intervention, I said. It's a long overdue conversation. Well, it feels like an attack to me, Dad retorted. That's because you're not used to being held accountable, Lisa said. Dad pushed back from the table. I don't have to listen to this in my own home. Dad, please, Mark's voice caught. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to give you a chance to be part of our lives, of your grandchild's life. But things have to change. What things? Dad demanded. Be specific. You need to acknowledge that you have a drinking problem, Mark said, and get help for it. Dad laughed bitterly. Just like that? Snap my fingers and be cured? No, Mark said. It'll be hard, and we'll support you, but it has to be your choice. There was a long silence. I glanced at Mom, expecting her to jump in with excuses or change the subject. Instead, she was staring at her hands, tears silently tracking down her cheeks. Mom? I said softly. She looked up. He's right, she whispered. All of you are right. Dad turned to her, betrayal written across his face. Elizabeth, no, Richard. Her voice was stronger now. I've enabled you for 40 years, made excuses, cleaned up your messes, lied to protect you, and look where it's gotten us. She gestured around the table. Our children are wounded. They don't trust us, and now our son is telling us we won't be allowed near our grandchild unless things change. I never said that, Mark protested. You didn't have to, Mom said. She turned to Dad. I've threatened to leave so many times, empty threats. But this, the thought of not knowing our grandchild, this is different. The room fell silent again. Dad stared into his water glass as if looking for answers there. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I don't know if I can change. I've tried before. Half-heartedly, Mom said, when it became inconvenient, when I threatened to kick you out, but never because you truly wanted to. He looked around the table, his eyes landing on each of us in turn. For a moment, I saw him clearly. Not as the monster of my childhood fears, not as the unreliable father who'd disappointed us so many times, but as a flawed, aging man who'd lost his way long ago. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry for everything. It wasn't a promise to change. It wasn't even an admission of his alcoholism, but it was the most genuine thing I'd heard him say in years. Create Dad's apology hung in the air for a long moment. No one seemed to know what to say next. Years of pent-up frustration and pain had been released, leaving us all emotionally exhausted. Finally, Mom stood up. "I think we could all use some dessert," she said, defaulting to her hostess role. "I made apple pie." "I'll help," I offered automatically, then caught myself. Old habits. As I followed Mom into the kitchen, I noticed her hands were trembling as she reached for the dessert plates. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. She didn't answer immediately, methodically cutting the pie into perfect slices. "I never wanted this for you kids," she finally said. "I thought I was protecting you by keeping the family together." "I know, Mom. Do you?" She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "Do you understand what it's like to love someone with a problem, like your father's? To constantly weigh leaving against staying? To worry about what would happen to him if I weren't there to pick up the pieces?" I'd never heard her speak so frankly before. "No," I admitted. "I don't. I tried to leave once. You know, when you were about 5. She arranged the pie slices on plates. "I packed a bag for each of us. We were going to stay with my sister in Seattle. I had it all planned out." "What happened?" "You came into our bedroom while I was packing. You looked at the suitcases and asked if we were going on an adventure." She smiled sadly. "And I just couldn't do it. Couldn't uproot you from everything you knew. Couldn't face the idea of raising 3 children alone. I thought about the woman she might have been without the weight of Dad's drinking, without the constant strain of maintaining appearances." "It's not too late, Mom," I said gently. "You still have choices." She handed me 2 plates. "Let's not keep everyone waiting." Back in the dining room, a strange truce seemed to have formed. Lisa was showing Mark and Emma photos from a hike she'd taken the previous weekend. Jeff was politely asking Dad about his golf game. Normal conversation, but with an undercurrent of fragility, as if we were all walking on thin ice. "Pie's ready," Mom announced, setting plates in front of each person. "Looks delicious, Mrs. Mitchell," Emma said, her smile a little too bright. "Please call me Elizabeth," Mom replied, and I realized it was the first time she'd ever made that offer to any of our partners. As we ate in awkward silence, I wondered if anything would really change. Dad had apologized, but he hadn't promised to get help. Mom had acknowledged her enabling, but she was already slipping back into her hostess persona. Were we just going to pretend this conversation never happened? Mark seemed to read my thoughts. "So," he said, pushing his half-eaten pie away, "where do we go from here?" Dad set down his fork. "What exactly are you asking for, son?" "I told you. I want you to get help. Real help. Not just cutting back for a few weeks until everyone stops watching you. Eh?" Dad looked physically pained at the thought. "Or therapy, or rehab, or all of the above." Mark's voice was firm. "I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you what you need, but I know what we've been doing isn't working." Dad looked to Mom, perhaps expecting her to defend him as she always had. She simply watched him, waiting. "And if I don't?" he asked, his voice small. "Then we'll have to reevaluate our relationship," Mark said. "All of us will." The words landed heavily. I realized Mark was doing something I'd never had the courage to do. Setting a boundary and sticking to it. "You're giving me an ultimatum," Dad said, anger creeping back into his voice. "I'm giving you a choice," Mark corrected. "Richard," Mom said quietly, "listen to what they're saying. Really listen." Dad looked around the table at each of us. "And all of you feel this way?" Lisa nodded. "I've been keeping my distance for years because of this. Why do you think I moved to Seattle?" All eyes turned to me, the peacekeeper, the one who always made excuses for him. I felt the weight of their expectations. Dad hoping I'd defend him, the others hoping I'd finally stand with them. I've spent my whole life trying to fix this family, I said slowly. Making excuses for you, Dad. Smoothing things over. Pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I took a deep breath. I can't do it anymore. I won't. Mark's right. Something has to change. Dad's face crumpled. For the first time, I realized how old he looked. The deep lines around his eyes, the sagging of his cheeks, the gray pallor to his skin. Drinking had aged him prematurely. I don't know if I can do this, he whispered. What if I fail? It was such a vulnerable admission that it caught me off guard. My father, who I'd always seen as either a threat or a burden, suddenly looked like a scared little boy. Then you'll try again, Jeff said, speaking up for the first time. That's what recovery is. It's not a straight line. Everyone looked at Jeff in surprise. He rarely inserted himself into family discussions. My dad was an alcoholic too, he continued. He relapsed 3 times before it stuck. But he did it. He's been sober 15 years now. I stared at my husband. In the 7 years we'd been together, he'd mentioned his father's drinking maybe twice. I had no idea his dad was in recovery. How? Dad asked, a flicker of something, hope, maybe, in his eyes. How did he do it? One day at a time, Jeff said. With support, from family, from his sponsor, from his group. He couldn't do it alone, and he couldn't do it for anyone but himself. I wouldn't be alone, Dad said, looking at Mom. Would I? She reached across the table and took his hand. No, but Jeff's right. You have to want this for yourself. Dad nodded slowly. I'll think about it. It wasn't the firm commitment I'd hoped for, but it was more than we'd ever gotten before. The evening wound down quickly after that. None of us had the emotional energy for more intense conversation. As we said our goodbyes at the door, Mom hugged me tightly. I'm sorry, Sarah, she whispered, for putting all this on you for so long. It's okay, Mom. No, it's not. She pulled back to look at me. But I'm going to try to do better. We both are. In the car on the way home, Jeff and I rode in silence for several miles. My mind was replaying the evening, trying to make sense of everything that had been said. Why didn't you tell me about your dad? I finally asked. Jeff kept his eyes on the road. It didn't seem relevant. We don't see my parents much, and he's been sober since before we met. Still, it's a big thing not to share. He glanced at me. Honestly, I didn't want to give you false hope. My dad chose sobriety because he was ready. Your dad might not. And if he's not, then you'll have decisions to make. His voice was gentle but firm, about what kind of relationship you want with him, if any. The thought made my chest tighten. Despite everything, the idea of cutting Dad out of my life entirely felt impossible. He was still my father. Still the man who taught me to ride. A bike, who came to every one of my soccer games, even if he was sometimes drunk, who cried when I graduated from college. I don't know if I could do that, I admitted. You don't have to decide tonight, Jeff said. Or tomorrow, or next month. But Mark's right. Something has to change. And it can start with you. With me? I'm not the one with the drinking problem. No, but you're the one who's always trying to fix everyone else's problems instead of focusing on your own needs. He reached over and squeezed my hand. You deserve better than to spend your life managing your father's addiction. His words hit home. All these years, I'd been so focused on what Dad needed, what Mom needed, what my siblings needed. I'd rarely stopped to ask myself what I needed. When we got home, I was exhausted but too wired to sleep. I sat on our small balcony, looking out at the Portland skyline glittering against the night sky. Jeff brought me a cup of tea and sat beside me. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You stood your ground tonight." "We'll see if it makes any difference," I said. "That's not the point. The point is, you did it for yourself. That's progress." I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. For the first time, I'd spoken my truth without worrying about keeping the peace. It felt both terrifying and liberating. "What happens now?" I asked, more to myself than to Jeff. "Now we wait," he said, "and we focus on our life, the one we're building together." I closed my eyes, trying to imagine a future where I wasn't constantly worried about my father's drinking, my mother's denial, my siblings' pain, a future where I put my own needs first sometimes. It was hard to picture, but for the first time, it felt possible. Create 6 months passed. Fall turned to winter, winter to spring. The world outside transformed, and slowly, so did my family. The changes didn't happen overnight. They came in small moments, quiet shifts that I might have missed if I hadn't been paying attention. 2 weeks after our family dinner, Dad called me. Not Mom calling on his behalf. Not a group text to all the siblings. Just Dad, his voice hesitant on the line. "I've been going to meetings," he said without preamble. "AA, 3 times a week." I'd been in the middle of preparing dinner, a stir-fry that now sat forgotten on the stove. That's great, Dad." "It's not easy," he admitted. "Listening to all these strangers talk about their problems, talking about mine." "I can imagine." "No, you can't," he said, not unkindly. "That's what I'm learning. No one really understands addiction unless they've lived it. Not even someone who's lived with an addict." It was such an insightful comment, so unlike the defensive father I knew, that I nearly dropped the phone. "Anyway," he continued, clearly uncomfortable with the silence, "I wanted you to know. Your therapist. You mentioned you were seeing someone. Is that helping?" The question surprised me. Dad had never shown interest in my inner life before. "Yes, it is. Dr. Barrett is really good." "That's good. That's really good." He cleared his throat. "Well, I'll let you go. I just wanted to check in." After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. He hadn't broken down sobbing or made grand promises about the future. But he'd reached out. He'd asked about me. It was a start. A month later, Mom invited me to lunch at our favorite cafe in downtown Portland. As we sat by the window watching people hurry past under umbrellas, she seemed different, less rigid somehow. "Your father and I are seeing a marriage counselor," she announced, stirring her soup. I tried not to look too shocked. "How's that going?" "Terribly," she said, then laughed. Actually laughed. "We spend most of the time arguing about whose version of the past is correct, but it's honest arguing at least. No more pretending." "That sounds healthy?" "It's exhausting, but necessary." She took a sip of water. "I'm also seeing someone just for me. A therapist, I mean." "You are?" This was even more surprising than Dad's AA meetings. "Don't look so shocked," she chided. "I'm not completely incapable of change, you know." "I didn't mean—" "It's all right." She reached across the table and patted my hand. "I know how I've come across all these years. The perfect wife, the perfect mother, always in control. It was a facade, Sarah. A way to convince myself I had some power in a situation where I felt powerless." I'd never heard her speak so openly before. "What changed?" She considered the question. Seeing you children stand together that night, realizing how much damage had been done despite all my efforts to protect you." She made air quotes around the word. "And honestly, the thought of not being allowed to be a proper grandmother to Mark and Emma's baby. The baby. In all the drama, I sometimes forgot about the new life coming into our family. Have they found out if it's a boy or girl?" "A girl," Mom said, her face softening. "They're naming her Claire Elizabeth." "They're using your name?" "Middle name only," Mom said, but she looked pleased. It was Emma's idea, apparently. She said despite everything, she admires how I've kept the family together. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to argue that keeping a family physically together while it fell apart emotionally wasn't something to admire. But another part recognized that Mom had done the best she could with the tools she had. "That's nice," I said finally. "Yes, well," she straightened her silverware. "I'm hoping to be a different kind of grandmother than I was a mother. More honest, less concerned with appearances." "I think that sounds wonderful, Mom." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I've missed this, just talking with you. When did we stop really talking?" "I'm not sure we ever started," I said honestly. She nodded, accepting the truth of it. "Then I suppose it's never too late to begin." Spring arrived, bringing cherry blossoms to the streets of Portland and baby Claire to our family. I visited Mark and Emma at the hospital the day after she was born, a tiny bundle with tufts of dark hair and her father's nose. "Want to hold your niece?" Emma asked, carefully transferring the swaddled infant to my arms. Claire was warm and solid, her eyes unfocused but somehow wise. I felt a surge of protectiveness so strong it brought tears to my eyes. "She's perfect," I whispered. "She is," Mark agreed, looking exhausted but happier than I'd ever seen him. "Mom and Dad are coming later. Dad's been sober for 5 months now." "I know. He tells me his day count every time we talk." These phone calls had become a weekly occurrence, awkward at first, gradually more comfortable. We mostly talked about neutral topics, the weather, sports, TV shows. But occasionally he'd share something from a meeting or ask about my work. Small steps. "Do you think it'll last?" I asked Mark when Emma went to the bathroom. He shrugged. "I don't know. I hope so, but I meant what I said. If he starts drinking again, he won't be allowed unsupervised time with Claire." "That seems fair," I said, gently rocking my niece. "What about you?" Mark asked. "How are you doing with all this?" I considered the question. The past 6 months had been a journey of their own. I'd continued therapy, learning to set boundaries not just with my family but with friends, colleagues, even Jeff. I'd declined projects at work that would have overwhelmed me, started a painting class I'd always been interested in, reconnected with friends I'd neglected. "I'm okay," I said. Better than okay, actually. I feel like I'm finally figuring out who I am outside of all the family drama. "That's great, Sarah." Mark squeezed my shoulder. "You deserve that. You've carried us, all for too long." Lisa came to visit a few weeks later, staying with Jeff and me since our apartment was closer to downtown where she had some job interviews. "I'm moving back to Portland," she announced over dinner. "Seattle was great, but I miss home." "Really?" I couldn't hide my surprise. Lisa had always been the sibling most determined to escape Oregon. "Don't look so shocked," she laughed. "People change. Plus, I want to be closer to my niece, and to you guys." "What about Dad?" Jeff asked. "Is that part of your decision?" Lisa twirled pasta around her fork. "Partly. I want to see if this sobriety thing sticks. And if it does, I don't know. Maybe we can build some kind of relationship. A real one this time." "And if it doesn't stick?" I asked. "Then at least I tried." she said simply. That's all any of us can do, right? Later that night, after Lisa had gone to bed, Jeff and I sat on the balcony, a tradition we'd started during those turbulent days after the family dinner. It's kind of amazing, I said. All the changes in just a few months. Your family had a lot of motivation, Jeff pointed out. A new baby has a way of making people reevaluate their priorities. It's not just Claire, though, I said. It was the confrontation. All of us finally being honest about the elephant in the room. True, but the elephant was always there. You just finally stopped tiptoeing around it. I leaned back in my chair, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. Do you think it'll last? All these changes? Jeff considered this. Some will, some won't. Your dad might relapse. Your mom might fall back into old patterns. You might too. Wow, thanks for the vote of confidence, I teased. I'm just being realistic, he said. Change is hard. People slip up. The important thing is that you've all started the process, and that you're changing for yourselves, not just for each other. I thought about this. It was true. I wasn't setting boundaries just to make a point to my family. I was doing it because I was happier and healthier with those boundaries in place. Dad wasn't staying sober just because Mark had threatened to keep Claire away. He was doing it because he'd finally admitted he had a problem that was destroying his life. Mom wasn't in therapy just to save her marriage. She was there to understand herself better. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I checked the clock. Nearly midnight. Late calls were never good news. It was Mom. Your father's had a heart attack, she said, her voice remarkably steady. He's at Providence. They're saying it's not too serious, but they're keeping him overnight. My stomach dropped. I'll be right there. No need to rush, she said. He's stable. I just wanted you to know. Are Mark and Lisa coming? I called them after you. Lisa's on her way. Mark's going to come in the morning. Emma's not feeling well, and he doesn't want to leave her alone with the baby. Do you need anything? Should I bring you a change of clothes? Food? Sarah, Mom's voice softened. I'm okay. I've got my purse and a book. The cafeteria is open until 2 a.m. Just come when you can. After we hung up, I sat there holding the phone, processing. 6 months ago, this call would have sent me into a panic. I would have dropped everything and rushed to the hospital, taking charge, managing everyone's emotions, neglecting my own needs. Do you want me to come with you? Jeff asked. Yes, I said, realizing I did want his support. But not right this minute. Mom says he's stable and she's okay for now. Let's go in the morning. Jeff looked surprised, but pleased. That's new. What is? You, not immediately jumping into crisis mode, trusting that your mom can handle herself. I hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. It was new, and it felt right. The next morning, we went to the hospital. Dad looked smaller somehow in the hospital bed, pale but alert. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, beeping steadily. Mild heart attack, he explained when I asked. Doctor says it was a warning shot. Need to change my diet, exercise more. He patted his stomach. Too many years of scotch and steaks. But you'll be okay? I asked. Good as new, they say. Just need to take better care of myself. He looked around at all of us gathered there. Mom in the chair beside him, Lisa perched on the windowsill, Mark and me standing at the foot of the bed. I'm sorry to worry you all. We're family, Lisa said. Worrying about each other is part of the deal. Dad nodded, his eyes suddenly wet. I've been doing a lot of that lately. Worrying about all of you. About the damage I've caused. Dad, you don't have to, Mark began. No, I need to say this. Dad sat up straighter. Last night, when they were wheeling me into the ER, I thought, this might be it. And all I could think about was regret. Regret for the years I wasted drinking. Regret for the pain I caused you all. He looked at each of us in turn. I don't want to die with those regrets. I want to make amends. Real amends. Not just words. Actions. The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. It wasn't a dramatic Hollywood moment. No swelling music. No tearful embraces. Just a family standing together in a hospital room, facing the truth of their shared past and the possibility of a different future. One day at a time, Dad, I said finally. That's what they say in AA, right? He nodded, a small smile crossing his face. One day at a time. As we filed out later, leaving Mom to sit with him while he rested, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. Not because I believed there would be no more difficult days ahead. There would be. But because for the first time, we were facing those difficulties together, honestly, as a real family. Imperfect, wounded but healing, one day at a time,